Hello, everyone. My name is Lionel Sandner from Pembroke Publishers, and welcome to our session tonight with Dr. David Costello. Before we get started, I would just like you to know that Pembroke Publishers' head office is situated upon traditional territories of the Wendat, the Anishinaabe Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Mississaugas of Scugog, Hiawatha First Nation, Alderville First Nation, and the Métis Nation. The treaty covering this area of land in Toronto, Ontario, is collectively known as the Williams Treaties of 1923. I would also like to acknowledge and thank the Wasanic people on whose traditional territory I live, work, and learn. The Wasanic people have lived and worked on this land since time immemorial. And I wish to recognize the significant contributions of Indigenous peoples across this land. We seek a new relationship with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, one based in honor and deep respect. And now it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker for this evening. If you read our bio that's on the landing page before you come into this particular webinar, you would know that Dr. David Costello is an author and professional learning facilitator who focuses on mathematics instruction and learning. He's located in the wonderful island of PEI, or Prince Edward Island, and he has supported many teachers in many roles, including being a numeracy interventionist, numeracy coach, numeracy leader, curriculum consultant, and maybe even tucked in there somewhere that dreaded administrator role that folks seem to find themselves in from time to time. What isn't said on that bio, and what I sort of feel is one of the silver linings of COVID, is I've had the honor over the last year of doing, I don't know how many, 10 webinars maybe.
We're
and
like buds.
And
close.
Something like that, and one with his wife as well. And I've had a chance to get to know David over COVID, so it really has been one of the highlights for me. And I know that in when I think of what David brings around math is if you sort of think of, when you hear him present, it's either I had a teacher like that, or I wish I had a teacher like that. I would have been so much better in math. The passion and the ideas and the practicality that he brings to every one of his webinars leaves me, and I know folks in the webinar, excited about math, wishing we were a math nerd as much as him, and working towards that. So David, it's great to have you here for the next hour or so to talk about mathematical modeling in real life situations. And I'll pass it over to you.
Okay, thank you, Lionel. Thank you, everyone. Thrilled to be here today. Don't know about you, but when I look at the calendar, I'm like, oh, I'm so glad today's the day. But then I look at the calendar and think, sweet mother of pearl, it's only Tuesday. So we're going to have a great time chatting math. So like Lionel said, David Costello, you can email me at any time, david@costellomath.com. If there's anything I can do, feel free. I'm on Twitter at Dr._Costello. If you're on there, feel free to follow me and I'll follow you back. Kind of sounds like stalking, but it's not stalking. And my website, costellomath.com. So what we have, just a little bit about who I am. Like Lionel said, I've had many roles. And you can see where I live on the East Coast, Prince Edward Island, smallest province in Canada. Just if you can put in the chat box quickly, just a yes or a no. If you've ever been in PEI, put a yes, or if you've not yet been here, put a not yet. And what we're talking tonight about is mathematizing student thinking. And where this really comes from is I've seen the math that I'm working with in school, and that teachers and students are examining and exploring. And there's a divide between what's happening in school and what's happening in the lives of students outside of school. So I really want to kind of delve into this tonight. And something that I really focus on in my work is I want to share effective strategies, but I want to share strategies that are manageable and sustainable for us, because I think there's a lot of stuff being put on our plate, and I want the strategies and the approach that I share to be meaningful and to be sustainable for teachers. So I'm seeing some people have been to PEI, some can't wait to come back, and some not been here yet. So what do we want? Well, we want our students to be able to see the beauty of math. and to apply it to their experiences. And when I said that to my children, I've got a child in grade 2 and grade 1, they said, the beauty of math. I said, trust me, there's beauty in math. And I want students to be creative, flexible, independent, critical thinkers who can communicate their thoughts. But I want them to be able to communicate it both when they understand and when they're engaged in struggle. And I want students to be problem solvers. So in short, we want students to be confident and capable learners. That's what we want. And I want to ask you if these look familiar. So 3 problems. There are 14 buckets of tomatoes at the farmer's market. In each bucket, there are 12 tomatoes. How many tomatoes are there in total? A farmer has a garden that is 8 meters long and 3 meters wide. What is the perimeter of the garden? And the local hockey team was in a tournament. The goalie stopped 48 shots in the first game, 24 shots in the second game, and 32 shots in the third game. How many shots does a goalie save during the 3 games? So here are some problems. I remember being in a classroom many years ago, and this student was given the one in the middle, the farmer question about the perimeter. And the student said, would a farmer actually measure their garden in meters? And who cares? Or about the farmer's market with the bucket of tomatoes. A, do we really need that many tomatoes? I don't like tomatoes, so I would say no. And B, how is that relevant? And for the hockey one, I've had students said, yeah, but the important question is, did they win the 3 games? And I want you to think about that briefly. Have you ever been given problems in math class and thought, I don't care. I don't care about this. I don't care how many pumpkins were in the field. It doesn't matter. Or have you ever had students saying, why are we doing this? Because this is what I've seen in classrooms. And I want you just to put a yes or a no if you've seen any of these in your classroom. Do you have students who are passive learners? Students who are relying on the teacher to tell them what the solution is or what the strategy is. They're relying on the teacher to tell them the next steps. And it's that student dependence that we have a lot in classes, and I'll say from K to 12, in that the students are relying on the teacher to tell them when they're correct or not. And going through the routine, I've seen and I've observed students who are going through the routine who can apply the concepts and can apply a process, but they're not making meaning with it. And then they're unable to judge the reasonableness of their answer or of their response because they're only going through that routine and they're not able to apply a meaning-making lens. And students asking why are we doing this? Who cares about this? Or when am I ever going to use this? And I know the answer that I was told going through school when we said, when are we ever going to need to know this? And the teacher would say, on the test next Thursday. That's when we need to know this. That's when. So we need to go beyond that. We need to go beyond students doing math for the sake of doing math. And I want just to put a Y or an N. Do you see those in the classroom? Do you see those in your students? Do you see them being passive and being dependent, waiting on the teacher or waiting on somebody to tell them what the next steps are? Do we see them going through a routine but not able to make meaning with it, so they're not able to judge the reasonableness of their answer? And students asking, why are we doing this? Why does this matter? Who cares about this? This is what we're seeing in math class, and this is where the realization has been coming up, in that we're seeing many students who are seeing a disconnect between math in school and the real world. And when they're not seeing math as being relevant, they're not going to engage. And without that engagement, they're not going to take risks and they're not going to work through stumbling blocks. And I'm looking at the chat box and I'm seeing yeses and yeses. So when we're seeing this, when we see this with 1 or 2 students, it's a learning concern. So we ask, okay, why are the students seeing this? But when we see this from many students and year to year, it's an instructional concern that we have to kind of take a step back and think, okay, why are we doing this? And what are we doing to contribute to this? And before we go any further, I want to frame it around this. What's the problem? people's like, right now that I'm sitting here in the evening, that's a problem. No, it's an opportunity. No, I'm just kidding. What's a problem? A problem has three characteristics. One, it has the initial state. That's what we're presented with. That's what the students presented with at the onset. Then we have the goal state. This is what is desired. This is a preferred outcome. And then between that initial state and the goal state, we have obstacles. Those are the bumps. Those are the bumps in the road that's causing us stumbling and causing us issues to get from the initial state to the goal state. And that's what we tend to see in every problem we're assigning in class. It has a beginning state, it has a goal state, and it has obstacles. And what we tend to see, and what I've tend to observe, either in classrooms where I'm teaching or where I'm being in working with a teacher, or through my conversations with students and with teachers, we tend to see there are generally four types of problems that we're mostly seeing in the class: procedural, words as labels, open-ended, and rich tasks. So let's kind of briefly go through these. So procedural problems are really the strategy is already identified and students just must apply the steps accurately. So for a primary example, solve 68 plus 15. The students know it's addition. Solve 8 is the same as question mark subtract 3. So we already know what the strategy is, and the students just have to apply the process. So these are types of problems that we see in books or that we would have seen in our math text. And this one, order of operations and division with decimals. And then this one from intermediate, addition of fractions and subtraction with integers. So these are the procedural problems. And it has an initial state, what we want or what we're given. It has the goal state, solve and find the solution. And then it has the stumbling blocks. How do we do that? So those are the procedural problems. And those has the three parts of the problem. But I want you to think, are they really relevant? Are they really relevant both in terms of what students engage with in their lives, and are they really culturally relevant? And then we have words as labels. And what we really have here is now we have a context provided. And students must read through the problem and decide which strategy to apply. And they're commonly known as story problems and word problems. So a primary example is Elijah had a collection of 8 marbles. After looking through some of his brother's old toys, Elijah found 7 marbles. How many marbles does Elijah now have in his collection? Word problem. Dane purchased 18 yearbooks for a cost of $96. If each yearbook was the same price, how much did each cost? Don't know why Dane needed so many yearbooks unless he's going to try to sell them for a profit after, but that's financial literacy, which is big in math. And we have an intermediate problem. 2 friends decided to share pizza. Ethan ate 2/5 of the pizza. Elias ate 2/4 of the pizza. How much of the pizza wasn't eaten? So these word problems are what we tend to see after the procedural problems. Think about what we tend to see in our text or in the work we give students. Procedural, then the word problems, because we are recognizing that it's increasing the level of complexity. But then we have open-ended problems, open-ended questions, which are getting a lot of traction in terms of mathematics today. And what these are questions that provide students an opportunity for a greater degree of choice in the strategy, both in which strategy to use and how to use it. So which number can you represent using 8 base 10 blocks? Great opportunity for differentiation. Which of the following fractions do not belong? Students will tell which one doesn't belong and the why, or which ones do belong and why not another one. Or the product of 2 fractions is between 1/2 and 3/4. What could the 2 fractions be? So these open-ended problems give the students a greater opportunity to enter the problem. And there's multiple points of entry and there's multiple points of exit. And then we have rich tasks. We're seeing a lot more rich tasks happening in class. And what rich tasks are, it provides students with an opportunity to make meaning within a context that's familiar to their lived experiences. So when considering a familiar context, students can recall experiences or situations they've had in and out of school. And rich tasks are meant to be opportunities for engagement and interest. So 2 students were using cubolinks to make a pattern. One student was making repeating pattern while the other was making an increasing pattern. When working on their individual patterns, the students realized that they use the same color cubolink for the 10th item. Is there a way that they will use the same color again for the 12th item? So this is purposeful, and these are providing a context that is relevant to them. And a rich task, another one for elementary, the school soccer team decided to purchase team hoodies. These hoodies were $22 each, or 4 for $80. If there were 22 players on the team, how much money would each hoodie how much money would the hoodies cost? So once again, relevant to an experience they may have had. And intermediate example, at the onset of the school fundraiser, the balance of the account was greater than $100. There were times over the 8 transactions which the balance went up and down. What could each transaction have been, and what's the current balance? So we're seeing within those problems, within procedural, words as labels, open-ended, and rich tasks, we see that there's those 3 components in there: the initial point, the initial state, the goal state, and the obstacles. And what we have is these are all called defined problems. These are the problems that we tend to see in the math classroom. And there's nothing wrong with these problems. But I think when we kind of take a closer look at them, we're going to wonder, okay, what are these problems actually providing students with? And a central component of defined problems is that all information students need to solve the problem is initially present. So think about that. All information necessary to solve the problem is initially present. Now, people might say, of course it is, David. That's our job. How do you solve a problem without the information? But think about what we encounter in our lives outside of school. Think about some of the things we encounter today. How many times in the real world do we have all of the information just passed to us? There is either a unique solution to the problem or a limited range of possible solutions. So you're either right or wrong, and there's a limited choice in that. And what that does is that may hinder students' opportunity to take risks in classrooms, because they're either going to be right or wrong, and they might not feel comfortable with that. And what I want you to think about is, how do we approach these problems? Now, I talked a bit before in some other webinars I've done with Pembroke about Polya's problem-solving approach. So this is Polya's 4 stages of problem solving, which is used in many math classrooms and many jurisdictions, both across Canada and in the United States. And there's the 4 stages: understanding the problem, crafting a plan, carrying out the plan, and review. So those are the 4 stages that we go through when we solve problems. And let's look at this. So we'll see what it looks like in terms of a problem. Winnie had 3 fish in the fish tank. Winnie's family bought her more fish for her birthday. Now there are 9 fish in Winnie's fish tank. How many fish did Winnie's family buy her? So we see understanding the problem. Winnie had 3 fish. Family bought more. Now she has 9. Okay. Took all that from the problem. Crafting a plan. The student decided, I'm going to draw a picture. Gold. Carrying out the plan. The student has drawn that picture. And reviewing. Winnie's family gave her 6 fish. So students can go through those 4 stages and solve the problem. Here's an example of one from elementary. Joseph's class set a goal to raise enough money to purchase 20 soccer balls for the school. Joseph's class had 28 students. Each student raised $50. How much money did Joseph's class raise for the fundraiser? So this graphic organizer looks a little bit different, but it's still similar. In your words, the student paraphrased the problem. Joseph's class set a fundraising goal. How much will the class raise? So understanding the problem, wants 20 soccer balls, 28 students raise $50 each. Crafting a plan, find relevant info, okay? Multiply to find the raised amount, okay? Then they carried out that plan, 50 multiplied by 28. They broke 28 down into 20 and 8, found the sum, and then went over to review. Joseph's class raised $1,400. And you can see on the directional arrows, the student kind of wrote some key points. Go back and ignore 20 because the 20 soccer balls was irrelevant information. And then on the bottom one, double check my work. Yeah, awesome. And then for intermediate students, 2 friends decided to share pizza. Ethan ate 2/5. Elias ate 2/4. How much of the pizza wasn't eaten? So you can see the student put the facts from the problem and understanding the problem, crafting a plan, add the amount that was eaten and then subtract from the whole, carrying out the plan. They did that and rethinking, reviewing, they had 1/10 of the pizza was left. So you can see how these poly stages of problem solving works. And that's a good thing because we've really spent a lot of time in classrooms with that. But here's what I want to ask going through this. Are these problems meaningful? Are they meaningful for students? Are we going to see engagement? We want students to be engaged with the mathematics, both in terms of identifying it and applying it. Passive learning. And I'm coming back to what we said earlier. If we're giving students all the necessary information, they're just waiting for it to be handed to them. Is it realistic? Are these problems realistic? And are they relevant? The cultural relevance. I would think right now we are recognizing the importance of our relevancy in our students' education. And are we providing them opportunities for our relevance? And the divide between school and the real world. Are we seeing the same type of problems in class as students are encountering in their lives outside of school? So think about this. Think about what we've been doing with our students. We've been focusing on defined problems, and are we actually having students see the relevance in math or how math is relevant to their experience? Now, can you do me a favor, a quick favor? Can you just type in this? Which of these would you be most concerned with? And there's no right answer for this. But I'm just curious, which of these? Are you seeing students struggling with math being meaningful? Are you seeing them struggling with engagement? Are they seeing the problems as not realistic or as being relevant? Are they wondering, why are we doing this math? How does this relate to the world that we live in? Because this is what we're seeing from the students, from the math that we're giving students. I'm going to take a little drink. Just Coke Zero. Because I want us to really think about this. I want us to really think about the problems we're assigning in class. And think of what our implicit messages are to students. So I'm seeing in here, teachers are concerned with passive learning, learned helplessness, cultural relevance, and passive learning teacher dependence. And here is my question for you. If we see this from year to year, then when are we going to take the time to kind of pause and think, what can we do differently? Passive learning, not interested in anything unless the tablet's involved. Exactly. So here is what I want to suggest the barrier is. One of the biggest barriers students face is connecting what happens in the classroom to the real world. So think about that. One of the biggest barriers students face is connecting what happens in the classroom to the real world. And we play a role in that as teachers. And are the questions the problem? The problems we assign our students play a role in supporting them as either passive learners or as independent problem solvers. I'm going to read that again. The problems we assign play a role in either supporting students as passive learners or as independent problem solvers. So we play a role in this. It's not enough that they merely perform calculations in math. It's imperative that they're provided real-life problems so they can apply a meaning-making perspective to their problem solving. If they can't make a connection with the problem, they may have difficulty in applying a meaning-making perspective. What do we need to do? Okay. By changing the tasks or questions we provide students, we can put more responsibility on the students. Students move from doing math to thinking mathematically. Doing math isn't enough. We did math going through school. I can tell you 5 and 4 more is 9. That's doing math. But we want students to be able to think mathematically. And by mathematizing, this is what we want. Student thinking is mathematized as they become confident and capable math learners. So they're not reliant on the teacher and they're not passive. And by mathematize, I mean student thinking is infused with mathematics, both in how they understand the problem and in how they approach the solution. So mathematizing, I love that word. We want students thinking to be infused with mathematics so that they're not just going through a rote process, but they're using mathematics to make sense of a problem, to identify ways to solve problem, and then to think, does this make sense? But how? If I had music, audio in here, I would go bum, bum, bum. This is the question. This is what we want. We want our students to be confident and capable math learners. But how are we going to do this? That'd be a really, really poor webinar if we just ended there and said, okay, that's it. But we're not going to. I'm going to suggest a way to do this, to approach this. And what I suggest is ill-defined problems. Now, I know people's thinking, ill-defined problems. Well, doesn't that just a page turner of a term? It's beautiful. It's not the most eloquent, but ill-defined, and you'll see why they're called ill-defined problems. We need to consider the problems we are assigning students, and we need to maybe think about what we can do a little bit differently. So what are ill-defined problems? Well, ill-defined problems are missing one or more of the following. It is either missing the initial state, the goal state, or the obstacle. So whereas defined problems has all three, ill-defined problems is really missing one or more of them. This is where it puts more responsibility onto the student. And this is where it becomes like realistic for students. And because rarely outside of school do we encounter a problem where we're provided all the necessary information at the onset. Instead, we have to dig into the situation and consider many factors. This is what we want students to do. We don't want students to just wait and be told, this is the information you're going to use. This is how you're going to use it. We've done that for a long time, and we're seeing that students are dependent learners and they're passive learners. We know that that's not enough, and that's why we're here. That's why we're trying to engage with professional learning. That's why we're recognizing we need to tweak how we're approaching things, because we want students to be confident and capable math learners who are independent. And ill-defined problems do not have a unique solution. Now, think about your students who are a bit hesitant to share their thinking in class because they don't want to be thought of as being wrong. When we remove that, there's only one correct response or there's a unique solution, we can take the pressure off them because there's more freedom, there's more opportunity for success. And that's what we want. We want students to take risks. But to do that, we have to engage them in an environment and an experience that promotes risk-taking. So here would be examples of ill-defined problems. The kindergarten classroom recognized that many of their supplies for centers were needing to be replaced. The teacher shared that they needed to buy new supplies, but they had a limited budget. That's an ill-defined problem for primary. Here's one for elementary. The local elementary school was selected as the site for the cross-country meet. I respect people that run just for the joy of running. If you ever see me run anywhere, it's because something bigger or something stronger is chasing me. But I digress. So the local elementary school was selected as a site for the cross-country meet. As part of holding this meet, the school had to decide how to accommodate people wanting to watch the meet. Okay? That's the ill-defined problem. And another one for intermediate is in planning end-of-year activities. We're going through that now. Fun times, but so nice to be able to do now that we're moving beyond COVID. The school administration decided that the grade 8 students would go on a field trip. The administration wanted to know what the cost per student would be for such a trip. So those are 3 problems, and I'm going to go back to them, and I just want you to take a quick look again. So the kindergarten classroom recognized many of their supplies for centers need to be replaced. The teachers shared they needed to buy new supplies, but they had a limited budget. The cross-country meet was coming to the elementary school, and as part of holding this meet, the school had to decide how to accommodate people wanting to watch the meet. And in planning end-of-year activities, the school administration decided that the grade 8 students would go on a field trip. The administration wanted to know what the cost per student would be for such a trip. Think about those 3 types of problems. Not all of the information is presented within here. Now, tell the truth. This is an opportunity to put ourselves into the webinar. Do you assign problems like this in the classroom? What are your initial thoughts of these problems? Because these can go one of 2 ways. There's usually a little gray zone. Either people are at one side of the continuum or the other side. What are your initial thoughts of these? I'm seeing Alexis Francis is no. I'm assuming you're meaning you're not using many of these in the classroom yet. And I want you to think about these problems when we're going through them. Now I teach kindergarten. Ellie Ellsworth, perfect. There are types of ill-defined problems for kindergarten. You would be so enthralled with how students approach them. It's pretty cool. Lisa Beals, no, there'd be 18 kiddos asking, what do we do? Yes, because we have been supporting them all along and feeding them the information. Love them because students need to think about what information they need to find. Absolutely. Liking the problem, they need to teach students to ask questions. Not yet, but I think they'd be great to get students thinking. Where would you find these types of problems? Okay, Ellie, can you remember that question and then ask me at the end, Ellie? Can you do that for me? And I see Cheryl, not yet. So what I'd like you to think about is think about how there's no way to approach a problem like this by rote. We have to engage with them, and it puts responsibility onto students into thinking through these things. Students must take an independent stance, and they must involve themselves with it, and they must engage in the mathematics and in the mathematical thinking. And you might be thinking, okay, David, we're like 34 minutes into this. I just saw 3 examples of ill-defined problems. Why would we do these in the classroom? They look different from what we usually give students. They do look different because think about all the stresses we see in the classroom and think about all the stumbling blocks we see as teachers, passive learners, dependents, not engaged, students wondering the why, they don't care about the problems. When we keep seeing that, we know that we have to do something a bit differently. So this is why we're going to work with ill-defined problems. Cultural relevance. They're relevant to the lived experiences of students. Students can see themselves in the problem, and students can see themselves in the problem, and they are engaged with the problem, and they can take an opportunity to work through this because it is relevant and it's meaningful. Now look at what I did for my next slide. I'm pretty impressed. It's the same slide. I'm just highlighting a different circle. Critical thinking. There's critical thinking in here, significant. They can't just apply from a rote process. They need to dig into the problem. They need to consider it. They need to think, what can they bring into it? The communication, how they communicate their thinking, how they communicate with others, what they're taking from the problem and what they're putting into it. Creativity and flexibility. Students need to be creative in how they approach this, and they need to be flexible because they will have to think about it from a different perspective, and it will be a bit different than what they've seen before. There is purpose in these problems because these are what they engaged with. So there's purpose in this, and it provides them with the why. It provides them with the who cares. Well, we do because it's in this. And it promotes independence because in order to solve these problems, students must move towards an independent state, and they must approach their thinking from an independent perspective. They can't be dependent on the teacher. So what we're seeing between defined problems and ill-defined problems, defined problems, math is the starting point. Think about it. In the procedural problem, solve 3, subtract 2. That's math. Word problems, story problems, words is labels. We're starting with the math in our mind, and we're just providing a context, kind of like, I know that I have a lot of students in my class that love skating. I'm going to give them word problems about skating. That'll work. And I'm going to use their names. That will be a game changer. No, it's not a game changer. You're going to be sorely disappointed. Whereas in ill-defined problems, the starting point is the context. It's in our experiences. It provides the engagement. It provides the cultural relevance. And in defined problems, during the entire process, students are thinking from a mathematical perspective. Students are approaching solving the problem purely from mathematics. Whereas in ill-defined problems, students go back and forth between context and math, which is what we do in our everyday life. That's how we approach it. Defined problems, students are provided the necessary information to solve the problem. Everything's handed to them. Might be in a table, might be in a picture, might be in the text itself, but everything's there. Whereas in ill-defined problems, students must make assumptions and craft restrictions when working through the problem. Students have to take ownership of their thinking, and they have to be independent. And in defined problems, problems have a structure. Whereas in ill-defined problems, problems are messy and are meant to be representative of the lived experiences of students. And I'm going to kind of come back to our first bullets here. For defined problems, math is the starting point. Even in our open-ended questions, represent a number using 8 base 10 blocks. It's math. It's all math. Whereas ill-defined problem starts with the context, because we want students to be going back and forth, context, applying math, but then coming back, does that math work in the context here? And then going back. And why don't we see many? Well, because we don't have much experience with ill-defined problems in the classroom. That's why we don't see more in the classroom. Where to find them? It came up in our questions. Where do we find these gems of problems? Teacher comfort level. They're different. Different means that we might not have as much comfort. And standardized tests. We mostly see defined problems in standardized tests. So when we know those are in standardized tests, we want students to be more comfortable with those types of problems. But we're not preparing them, and we're not supporting them to see math outside of school. Math just doesn't happen between 11 and 12 in the school day. We want students to see the mathematics and to consider how math can help them solve their encounters as they're outside of school. Assess. How are we going to assess these? And moving from product to process. It's not about what's your correct response. It's about what thinking did you engage with through this. And let's look at Polya's 4 stages of problem solving within these ill-defined problems. So this is a kindergarten classroom. that their supplies need to be replaced. So the teacher shared they need to buy new supplies that had a limited budget. So the student, in their own words, kindergarten buying new supplies. Love it. Succinct to the point. Understanding the problem. New supplies, not much money. Boy, as an administrator, I agree. We need new supplies, not much money. Crafting a plan. The student can't do it. Don't have enough information. Ouch. Polia's work doesn't help us with this one. What about here? The local elementary school was selected as the site for cross-country meet. As part of holding this meet, the school had to decide how to accommodate people wanting to watch the meet. Understanding the problem, the cross-country meet, we need somewhere for people to watch. Are we outside? And how many people will there be? Crafting a plan, we don't know. Don't have the information. How many people are going? What's the space? How many usually go in through this? And our intermediate example, in planning end-of-year activities, the school administration decided that grade 8 students would go on a field trip. Administration wanted to know what cost per student would be. So in your own words, need to know how much it costs for each student to go on the trip. Understanding the problem, we know the grade 8s are going. How many? Not a sweet clue. Where are they going? No idea. What prices are there? Not a clue. Don't know where we're going. Crafting a plan? Can't craft a plan without the answers to these questions. So here is what my suggestion is. Our traditional 4 stages of problem solving do not work. They're not enough in order to solve ill-defined problems. And I'm going to make a declarative statement. You can see even from the defined problems, we can solve these 4 stages of problems solving without really thinking mathematically. We can do it by doing math. So what I want to suggest is we need another consideration of how to approach these real-world problems. Because Polly's stages of problem solving, this process isn't going to equip us with an approach to solve problems that we encounter in the real world. So what we have is mathematical modeling. And now this is a term that I've had to kind of even think about myself, because when we hear about modeling in class, in math, we think of 2 ways. One, I'm going to model this first, and then you're going to do it. The I do, we do, you do. Gradual release of responsibility. That's how we're going to model. That's not what we're talking about here. The other approach that we hear when we think about modeling is model your thinking using base 10 blocks. Model your thinking using a graph. That's not working here either. Instead, mathematical modeling, and we're seeing this in many curricula starting to come up, and in Ontario, it's in the algebra strand. But in the United States, it's in standards and practices. And even within this, we're seeing this as a process, as a way that we can solve real-world problems. So there's 4 components. Understanding the problem. Students take time to understand the problem. We must recognize the context, what's being asked, and what information is required. So what's going on, what's being asked, and what information do I need? Analyzing the situation. This is a significant difference from what we have students. Instead of being dependent and passive learners, this is where students take ownership, and this is where students become independent. Students take the time to refine the real world problem, so they make it work. So based on the context that is relevant to them, they make their own assumptions based on what they think. So an example of this might be, okay, for the grade 8 field trip, I know that we usually do 1-day field trips, so we're not going for the week. We're not going to Disney World. Sorry. We're just going within an area that we can get to, have fun, and come back within the 1 day. So they're making the problem workable based on their experiences. Then we have 3, creating a mathematical model. This is where we put the context aside, because now we have a workable problem, and we approach it purely from a mathematical perspective. This is where we apply a mathematical concept, lens, strategy, approach to solve the problem. And we think about it purely from math because we framed it as workable. And then in component 4, this is where we go back and we look at our work thinking, okay, does this math solve the problem? And does it work when I apply it back in context? Does it answer my question? So you can see through this. Component 1, 2, and 4 is all about within the context of the real world problem. It's in the context. It provides the why do we care bit. Whereas component 3 is all about the math. So mathematical modeling provides students with the ability and pathway to solve problems that are similar to their lived experiences. It's about mathematizing student thinking so the students can see and apply the math that can be used to solve real world problems. You know, that's a great phrase, mathematizing thinking. Oh, that's why we picked Mathematizing Student Thinking. It's a book. And mathematics is not the starting point. So some people think, well, sweet mother of pearl, shouldn't it be the starting point? No, not necessarily all the time. Instead, students are presented with a problem that's based in the real world. So the real world isn't just a context. It's not just about, you know what, I'm doing perimeter, so I'm going to get students talking about a garden. That should work. That's going to hook them. No, it's not. We can't just have the real world as a context. It needs to drive the work. And the reality within the problem is that the starting point is the real world, and it's the crux of the problem. Within this approach, both the real world and the math are taken with significance. It gives it the relevance. So what we have now, we have cultural relevance. This is meaningful. This is providing the why, the who cares. It's meaningfulness. We have engagement. Students are wanting to solve these problems because they care about them, because they can make sense of their lives outside of school. And they're active, independent learners. And what we have from this is we have purpose. And we have removed the barrier between school and the real world the students are in. It's not math only between 11 and 12 in class, and then we can't apply it when we go outside. It's not like that. It's about math, and they're seeing math. So let's look at this. The kindergarten classroom that needs supplies for their centers on a limited budget. Look at what students have to think about just to approach this problem. I know the problem's about buying supplies. The supplies that kindergarten class has needs replacing. There's a limited budget. What questions need to be answered? Well, what supplies are going to be bought? What information does the student need? Well, what's the budget? What supplies will be bought? And how much are the supplies? And what experiences can they bring to the problem? I know the kind of things that I'd like to play with in kindergarten, and I know some of the prices, and I know where to find the exact prices. So they're able to make connections into what they view the problem could use to make it workable. And this is a local elementary school with the cross-country meet. The school had to decide how to accommodate people watching. So what do I know? Well, the school's holding a cross-country meet, and how many people can watch? What questions need to be answered? What's the plan to place people that watch the meet? And what information is needed? How many people will want to watch? What's the size of the area that can hold people? How many people can fit into the area? And how many people usually run at these? And what experiences can I bring to the problem? I have been to a game before, and usually each athlete can only have 3 to 4 people come and watch. And when sports happens outside, more people can come because there's more space for them. Ill-defined problem. Here's the grade 8 field trip at the end of the year. So the administration wants to know what the cost per student for such a trip. Students, what do I know? Well, the grade 8s are going on a trip. The school needs to figure out the cost per student. What questions need to be answered? What's the cost? And what information is needed? Well, where's the field trip? What are the factors included in the cost? Travel, accommodations, food, and chaperones. Are students paying for any of the field trip? And what experiences can the students bring to this problem? When I've been on field trips, I usually pay for my own food. Chaperones usually pay for their own food. Most field trips are usually one day, so a hotel isn't needed. And students usually pay for a small amount of the trip. So you can see how students have to take an active stance within this. They can't rely on the teacher to give them all the information. So let's consider this. This is another ill-defined problem, and is very relevant into some of the communities we're in. The population of your community is growing. There are already limited housing options available to current residents. What can the community do? Well, let's see. In the first component, understand the problem, the teacher would want to anticipate how the students will answer these 4 questions. How will the students answer? What do I know? What questions need to be answered? What information is needed? And what experiences can I bring to the problem? So the teacher would want to anticipate that to help facilitate them in moving through. So the teacher is not going to direct students, and the teacher is not going to feed students in information, but the teacher is going to help facilitate this. And in analyzing the situation, we want teachers to anticipate, what assumptions can I make regarding this situation? And how can I make the situation workable? What changes are there going to be? And what stays the same? These are the questions that we as teachers would want to anticipate how students will answer. And create the math model. This is where we don't think about it in terms of the context. We think about it in terms of the mathematics. So we want teachers to be thinking about what math language and concepts can the students apply to the structured problem? What representation and support can the students apply to build a mathematical model? What pictures, diagrams, or graphs might help people understand your information model and results, so the communication? And how can you organize your data to share with an individual who is unfamiliar with your project? And the last component, the analyze and assess model, does the math model created by the students lead to a reasonable solution? So this is where students use their meaning making and can judge the reasonableness, because this problem is relevant to them and it's connected to their lived experiences. And do other alternative mathematical models exist? So this is where the teacher plays a role in being a facilitator instead of being the one that's pulling students through this. Students take that active stance, and students take that opportunity to make meaning. So I want to ask you a question, and I'm going to go back. Can you put a yes or no? Does your school or board currently have an issue with the amount of substitute teachers? Can you put yes or no? Does your school or school board currently have an issue with the amount of substitute teachers available? Okay, I'm seeing yes, 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 yes. So which problem is more appealing for you? What is the average salary of substitutes within the Atlantic provinces? That's a math problem. Be a gem of a one to solve. So that's one problem. Or is this one more appealing? We are currently experiencing a shortage of substitute teachers. Many absences are now going unfilled. How can this issue be addressed? So in the first one, it's pretty easy. It's a calculation. However, look at the one at the bottom. Students would have to, and ourselves would have to look through this and think, okay, well then what percentage of absences are going unfilled now? What was the percentages that were going unfilled before? How many substitute teachers do we have in the pool now compared to how many substitute teachers have we had in the pool before? Have we had a lot more unfilled absences now? And now let's think of ways that we can kind of address this. What are the salary considerations? So it's much more meaningful for us. And that meaning drives cultural relevance, and it drives relevance, and it drives our engagement. So all this is taken from my book, Mathematizing Student Thinking, and it's available as an ebook that you can read through for free. Woo-hoo! Book of the month in May. And it's filled with problems, prompts, student work samples, and it's filled with ways that we can mathematize student thinking. Because I'm not saying that we only need to have ill-defined problems. But what I'm saying is we can't only give defined problems all the time. We need to have a range of problems in the classroom. And mathematizing student thinking is about bringing the real world into math and about removing that barrier from the school to the experiences of students outside of school, and about engaging students with mathematical modeling that we're seeing students being required to engage with, both in terms of curriculum, in terms of standards and practices and processes. And it's about making math meaningful and getting students to be independent, confident, and capable math learners. So here's my website you can go to. You can sign up so that you can be provided with emails and tips when I post new things. I have instructional videos. I have problems of the week for K through 9, and I have problem solving. I have blogs, and I have classroom connections. And here is my contact information. You can email me at david@costellomath.com. Feel free if there's anything I can do for you, your school, or your board. I'm on Twitter at Dr._Costello. You can find me on Facebook, Costello Math. And once again, there's my website. I'm going to stop talking now. Take a breath.
That's great. Thank you, David. I do have one question, but just before that, just a note to folks. You'll notice in the chat, I think I got the right link there to your book, and there's a little note on how to preview your book as Book of the Month. And we also have a draw coming up right at the very end. Everyone stayed, so please stay just for a couple more minutes, and we're going to draw a name for someone to be able to get a free ebook of their choice. Hopefully yours, David, after our session today. And
that's exciting.
Very exciting, yeah. So, but I know just there was a lot of sort of agreement on a lot of things you were talking about, and there were questions around those ill-defined problems. And so I was doing the same thing. I'm like, okay, well, where do I get the problems? How do they work? But then when you went to that look at this section, and you kind of went through the 4 parts of the model, but then you had the teacher moves with the questions. Are those like anchor charts in the classroom, or do you see those as kind of just for teachers only?
They really can be both. I know what I've done in the classroom before. Sometimes I would just have those questions on a clipboard for me when I'm going talking to students and kind of chatting with them. And then other times, what I've done with a group is when they know those questions, I'll say, these are the questions that I'm going to ask. Yeah. If you hit a stumbling block, you can use these to support you going forward too. And in terms of where do you get these problems, you can reach out, email me, or connect with me on Twitter. I can support you with these. The book has quite a few problems that you can immediately take to the classroom, but otherwise reach out. And what I'm going to suggest is don't go tomorrow thinking I am going to do ill-defined all day, every day for the next 15 years. No, start small and just be mindful that the students will find these a bit trickier at first because they're not used to them. And to give yourself more time to spend with them, because it's not going to be this one problem that in 60 seconds it's done. They're going to need more time to work through that and the discourse.
Yeah, that was actually my other question, because it's like the skills to build that up, they're all novice learners. So that's going to take time. And there is, I guess, a bit of a gradual release model there while you're learning at the same time. But I like the idea.
Well, then that's it. And then I do these as a whole group too. And I'm just coming into a conversation we had, Lionel. This would have been on another webinar. I see this as really connecting very well to STEM as well, because they're really bringing in these things. And when we've heard for so many times, students don't care about concepts, students want to know the why. I think when we keep hearing that we have to kind of pause and think, what can we do to address this?
Yeah. Yeah, well put, well put. So good. Well, just before we say thanks at the end there, we're going to try this lucky draw. It's a new feature on our webinar platform. So what I'll do is I just press a button here, folks, and I draw from the audience, and we just give it a spin, and I think it shows up on your screen. So let's try and see what happens here. Can you see that, David?
I can. This is kind of like The Price is Right.
There we are. Renana Assad is our lucky winner. So
congratulations.
Someone from Pembroke will be, I'll just take a screenshot of that so I have it. Someone from Pembroke will be contacting you tomorrow, Renana. I hope I said that right. And offering you a chance to pick a ebook of your choice from our catalog. So congratulations. And David, on behalf of everyone, and I'm just quickly looking at a few of the comments in the chat are thank you. I always learn lots. Very meaningful presentation today. So on behalf of everyone else on the chat but can't be talking, thank you very much for taking this hour with us. And we look forward to exploring the book. And I know you have a series coming up near the end of August with a few other authors. So folks, keep your eyes open for a 4-part series dealing with math as we move into the new school year. So thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. And David, I'll leave the last word to you.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, so much for this. I really enjoyed talking about it, and I really see this as being a great way to engage students, especially coming back when they might not be that engagement level that we want. And yes, Ellie, you can definitely use these for a whole group math talk. And the 4-part webinar series Lionel mentioned, it is a math hat trick. Pretty clever. Pembroke is on the ball with that. And it kind of provides the what, the how, and the what, the how, and the when to kind of do this, working through the math. And it's meant to kind of be a comprehensive support. But anyway, thank you, everyone. Reach out at any time. I am only a tweet or an email away.
Great. Thanks. Have a good evening, everyone. Thanks. We'll see you next time.